Mets fans, I'm getting tired of this. I'm getting tired of saying the exact same nonsense every single day, yet at the exact same time, the Mets have done nothing but perform in a nonsensical manner for 2 months straight that we find ourselves repeating ourselves constantly, as the Mets are currently on not just a 1 week slide, not just a 2 week slide. No, folks, if we go all the way back to 2 months now, the Mets have been one of the worst teams in all Major League Baseball, as you guys can see beside me right there. And we're going to get into in our latest Mets breakdown today on the WardyNYM platform as you hit that like and subscribe on your way in, just how bad this offense has been, how much it's currently killing their 2025 season, what they can do right to right this ship, if at all, along with David Stearns and the fatigue that comes along with them from the fan point of view. In case you're wondering what I mean by that, we're going to expand as to what David Stearns had to say with the media as of late, and why the Mets continue to sit on their hands instead of actually making some type of proper action for a baseball club that has quickly found themselves now just trying to make playoffs versus trying to actually win the division. Yes, is there still baseball to be had? Absolutely. And can the Mets right this ship for sure? But time is ticking. It is of the essence, and things are getting worse before they find themselves getting better. That, along with the latest on the prospect front, as guys in McLean, Jonah Tong, Brennan, Sproat, three of which we would love to see at the Major League level potentially as soon as a season. Maybe we should have saw at least some of them a month plus ago. They're continuing to cruise and dominate in the minor leagues, so we're going to emphasize that along with when we can hopefully, again, keywords hopefully, see at least one of these guys at the big league level. And I want to see your initial reactions to all the following topics in the comments down below, everybody. We're not holding back in this one, and I understand that this video is dropping just a couple hours before the Mets have their latest game tonight, so if they do ball out against the Brewers, fantastic. We'll break it down then with Frankie Monttos towing the rubber that we're all so excited to say. Unless your name is David Stearns, are you really saying that? If you're not being sarcastic, I don't think you guys are falling in that category. But all right, let's get right into this, guys. Shout out to our amazing sponsors that make the content happen, as always, at Moomoo, the official trading platform of the New York Mets, as well as SeatGeek that has you covered for all your ticketing needs. Guys, SeatGeek has over 70,000 active events to choose from. Not only are they the #1 rated ticketing app in the game today for a reason, but you don't need to use them for Mets tickets, because I don't blame you if you don't want to attend Citi Field right now. The way that the team is continuing to not show up, which is quite the contrary versus the 2 months of the season that we found themselves balling out at Citi Field with the best record at time in all of baseball at home. Since then, the Mets have not been that team. They have not had the dog in them. But with the NFL season right around the corner, with preseason starting today that many of you guys are watching for your favorite clubs, as well as what we have on the comedy show front, concert show front, and other big sporting events, SeatGeek again has you covered, everybody. So all you guys got to do there is head over to SeatGeek app and utilize it, because they have a fantastic rating scale system from red to green, 1 to 10. What that means is if you try to purchase a ticket in the app that's more in the green range, 7 through 10, it's a great bang for your buck, and you should probably get that ticket in the SeatGeek app. But if you go after one that's more in the red range, 1 through 4, it's not a good bang for your buck. You're spending a hefty price that you otherwise probably shouldn't there because of who's selling it, and you should get that ticket elsewhere there in the SeatGeek app for a better price potentially. So folks, utilize our promo code WARDY10, link down below in the description, that way you get 10% off your next ticket purchase. And thank you, as always, to SeatGeek for being an amazing sponsor on the platform. But as you guys see right beside me, let's kickstart this one with the most obnoxious graphic that I could show you today, which is the reality of the Mets since June 13th. And the reality is, outside the New York Yankees, the New York Mets have been one of the worst teams of baseball. And the fact that the Mets are the bottom 3 worst in the game record-wise, only trailing the Washington Nationals, who over this period of time have completely went belly up when it comes to their front office and coaching staff. They fired Mike Rizzo, their GM, and they fired Davey Martinez, their longtime manager there. We look at the Colorado Rockies. They fired Bud Black earlier this year, that we know, and they obviously are a team that's going nowhere because they have such a terrible roster to begin with. Not a slight on Rockies fans, so the select few that may come across this, it's just a matter of fact. The New York Yankees have been so bad. That is exactly why you barely see any Yankees fans coming into our live chats, as the Mets lose yet another big ball game, now dropping 9 of their past 10 over this past day, because they themselves are playing just as bad, if not worse. So Mets fans and Yankees fans can actually come together for a change to say, yeah, both our teams are absolutely piss poor right now, and things need to get better and fast. And when we talk about just how bad things have been for this Mets team, again, that is truly the tip of the iceberg, in my humble opinion, because there's a whole lot more to talk about than just that. Because let's go ahead and let's relay more numbers here. And I want to give a shout out to my guy, Jeremy Vaccaro, who's a follower of mine, for sending me this screenshot from the Mets postgame show on SNY this past day, just to look at the collective effort, or lack thereof, from this Mets offense. Let's take a look. Since June 13th, with a record of 18-29 over that span, the Mets are averaging 3.9 runs per game. Bottom feeder, last in baseball. Average 224, 29, so second to last. So not that as bad, but still horrendous. Expected, we look at extra base hits, 119. Second, oh my goodness gracious, it's almost the worst in baseball. It's third from worst. Then you look at OPS, 666. Can't figure out a worse number than that, right? 29th in baseball. So again, the Mets have either been bottom feeder the worst or one of the worst in all these offensive statistics. When it comes to WRC plus, which is grading a team's collective output on offense, and it's on a scale of 100, meaning that if you're above 100, you're above league average. If you're below 100, you're below league average. To this point, over the past calendar month, the Mets are second to last in that regard, if not bottom feeder themselves. Then we add in the obvious statistic, which is the one that we have been relaying all season long, because nothing has changed on that front. Whether they have been a bottom 5 feeder or they've been the worst in baseball, as we currently speak, the Mets are bottom 3 in the game today, with hitting with runners in scoring position when looking at team average. So, okay, things are really bad with the offense, right? But when I tell you they're bad, they might even be greater than what you initially thought. Because then let's get on to not just the offense, because this doesn't all fall on their shoulders. A lot of it does, but not all of it. The pitching staff and the lack of length comes into play as well. And as you guys can see here from yesterday's game graphic, 51 straight games would have 2 different starting pitchers recording at least 1 start of 6 innings. So, as we have been saying, if your name is not David Pearson, you would provide jack all for this team when it comes to actually giving them length. And you want to know just how bad of a stretch this is for the Mets? We're going back all the way till 1901 is the last time that the Mets, or really anyone for that matter, fell in this category. So, just when you think again that the Mets continue to get worse, that it can't get much worse than this, they continue to one-up themselves. And this has been a fantastic collective effort. You almost have to tip the cap with just how bad this team has been. When the pitching staff has not provided any length whatsoever, that goes in direct hand with how the roster was constructed heading into the season. So that's where you look at David Stearns in particular. We look at the rotation that started the year. Frankie Monttos went down with injury right away. Sean Manaea went down with injury right away. Kodai Senga obviously went down with injury, and prior to that, he was fantastic. But since Senga went down with injury, that has been the big domino that's fallen, with all the other little ones falling since. Tyler McGill, we have an update. He's been throwing a bullpen, and he's expected to begin a rehab soon, so that's good to hear. But how much is McGill going to be a needle mover for you on the pitching end? I guess we'll wait and see, as he's currently actually the second most valuable starter in the Mets rotation of their options. And no, that's not exaggeration. Look at the numbers. He has, I believe, the second highest WAR out of all eligible starters to this point for the Mets, even with all the time that he's missed. Then you look at Griffin Canning. We know the ruptured Achilles. He's not returning anytime soon. I'm wishing the best in his recovery. Then we look at why the Mets maybe haven't considered one of the young guns in the Brennan Sproats, the Noah McLeans, and the Jonah Tongs of the world. We're going to circle back to this conversation towards the end of the show here, because I have a lot more to say about that and some choice words in doing so. But let's get to the matter of fact, what has been the key core problem with this team throughout the vast majority of the season, and it comes down to their offense, as we continue to realize. And the reason why I'm emphasizing these numbers, everybody, is because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this Mets team has a collective problem offensively. Yet if you ask David Stearns and this Mets team, they would tell you that everything's spick and span. And obviously I'm being sarcastic as saying that. I know Stearns is the first guy who's far from happy with the lack of results the Mets are getting right now. But in that same breath, this is the same David Stearns who obviously hasn't done enough to help right the ship. And I know it's not just solely on him, right? It comes down to the roster, it comes down to the coaching staff, and everyone in between. This is a collective effort with the Mets not performing well. But the frustration that so many Mets fans, including myself, have is as follows. The same exact issues that we have been calling out since the start of the season, since that first series lost in Houston, before it was even fully the calendar month of April, mind you. First series loss of the year, and Houston to begin the year. The commonality in that series was a lack of proper hitting with runners in scoring position, and a lack of proper hitting in general. You know, if you look outside of guys like Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor to start the season, and the spurts of Juan Soto, there leaves a lot to be desired when you look at this club collectively. And this is where it becomes far more of a philosophy issue than it is just an individual player issue. When we look at the numbers further, you look at the analytics. And what do the analytics tell you? The Mets are pretty much a top 10 dog in every category, from pitching to offense. So when you look at the analytics, it says to you, this team should not be performing the way that they are. Yet here they are. And this is where I genuinely feel that a guy like David Stearns is causing, to a degree, a problem, and here's why. This is where the Stearns fatigue kicks in. When I say fatigue, I mean that in the manner of Mets fans who are fed up with a lot of nothing happening and the same exact results happening as well. It's almost like we can see it from a mile away because there's nothing to suggest that things are going to get better. But as we expand on that point in particular and we look at the fatigue with this team, this has been, again, a collective issue. And when we look at the early criticisms that we had with guys and runners in scoring position, especially the belief, quoting Steve Cohen from his tweet a month ago, the runner in scoring position roles will turn around. You know, David Stearns saying he has the utmost faith in this team. We know we're a very good team, and the results will be there, right? Carlos Mendoza says, we just got to keep kicking. The results will be there, that kind of thing. Well, the results haven't been there. And even when you look at all the analytical numbers, I think that also is where we say to ourselves, is this hurting the Mets? It really might be. And let me expand as to why that is. If the Mets are pretty much a top 10 statistic in offense and pitching and all these advanced numbers, yet they have been third from last in baseball when looking at the worst records in the game for the past 2 months, back to back now, it's been horrendous. Why hasn't David Stearns done enough? Why hasn't David Stearns maybe done something rather drastic? Well, the obvious counter is one, David Stearns is not notorious for going out of his way to do something rash in season like this. He wasn't like that in Milwaukee. We shouldn't expect him to necessarily be like that with the Mets. But the problem that we find ourselves in is as follows. If the Mets numbers were the same as pretty much what they are now when you look at the advanced metrics and the analytics, going back to when they were 21 games above 500, and yet they are the same now, is that the reason as to why David Stearns has sat on his hands and not do more than what they maybe otherwise could have done? And I'll get into what those things can be here shortly. But you do have to really wonder that for a second as a fan. If all the expected numbers tell you that you're facing poor luck and that things will get better, but they haven't yet, is that why this has been a continued a post that's continued to be pushed instead of actually getting to it, getting to the line and trying to step over it? Is that why we continue to push it? Is that why we have to wait another week of bad baseball? Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks until David Stearns says, okay, enough is enough. We genuinely find ourselves wondering and pondering this as Mets fans because there has been no action. There has been nothing to suggest that they're going to go ahead and do something in the immediate future. May they do that soon? I hope so. That's what we've been dying and calling out for the past month and a half to 2 months now. But the fact that we are now roughly 2 weeks into August, post-trade deadline, and a team that's had the same collective fundamental issues from their offensive output to their piss poor, pardon my French, everybody, that's how you know we're getting bad here, to their poor base running, which has been the case at times. And, you know, I say at times because the Mets have actually been a superior base running team this year while being slow. But as of late, we know that they've had some very questionable decisions on either rounding third when you shouldn't be rounding third, or because Tyrone Taylor should have been in there for Marte yesterday, or a couple days prior where Tyrone Taylor should have rounded third to get to home for an opportunity, but Mike Sarbaugh said, hey, pump the brakes. We got to stay there at the hot corner. Whatever the case may be right now, there are various aspects that have cultivated into why the Mets have the issues that they have now. But the fact that the advanced metrics and numbers tell you that the Mets aren't as bad as they are is what's keeping David Stearns, among others, in this coaching staff and front office from going ahead and doing something of greater importance. And what exactly can the Mets do of greater importance? Great question that you guys may ponder that I'm going to have the answer to, and it is as follows. No, it's not to just drastically make a managerial change. The Mets are not going to fire Carlos Mendoza, especially in season. Not a chance, especially for a team that's still on the cusp of hopefully having 90-plus wins this year. Hopefully, keyword there. Then you look at the other aspects of this club, and you say to yourself, okay, what about the hitting coaches? You know, we're going to continue to beat this drum, and the reason why we beat this drum is because all the offensive numbers I just relayed to you. When it's a philosophy issue, when Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, your Fab Four that Steve Cohen loves to label it, continues to underperform, continues to have zero clutch gene, and continues to show that as soon as the Mets actually blow an early lead, they roll over and die instead of just getting the ball game started the way that they did so brilliantly last year, Don't you think it's about time to consider a change in that philosophy? Don't you think at absolute minimum that there should be some self-reflection? And this is to not say that Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes haven't done a lot to try to fix these woes. I'm sure they have to varying degrees. But in that same breath, we know that Eric Chavez is the same man that'll go out on social media and make sure he's replying to fans to tell, oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm sitting on my hands and doing absolutely nothing while things are going bad right now because he wants to be a smart aleck, and that's fine. But while he's going ahead and doing that, we're getting the same exact results, so he's not helping himself whatsoever in that regard. And secondly, the Mets, since they've hired Eric Chavez, have not been a superiorly consistent team in offense whatsoever. Regardless on the roster makeup, they have not been in that category for a long-standing period of time. When they were last summer, it's because they had the clutch gene. It's because they knew how to rally back. They have zero identity in that regard this year, and they look like a shell of what they once were. So, what do you do if you're David Stearns and the Mets? You absolutely consider, at minimum, parting ways with one of Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes. For the same exact reasons I've been relaying you guys constantly, I will say it again. It's not just about all the reasons as to why Chavez shouldn't be hitting coach right now, and you can show me the laundry list in that regard, because truthfully, there is nothing to suggest that he should still be here. He is not a David Stearns hire, nor is Barnes. These were under the previous Billy Upper regime, if not later than that. So, okay, there's no pre-existing bias. And then you add in the fact that the Mets collectively as an offense have been horrendous for a great stretch of time. Okay, another reason to suggest why he shouldn't be here. You look at the laundry list of reasons as to why an Eric Chavez shouldn't be here, but the most notable one is one I haven't stated until now, and it's as follows. You have to make a statement. Regardless on how the players feel about the hitting coaches, and I know that most of them will tell you that they love Eric Chavez. Maybe not all of them, but I'm sure a good contingent of players at least have respect for Eric as the former player and great glove out of the hot corner the way that he was for all those years for the A's especially. But this is about making a statement. And in order to make a statement, you have to ruffle feathers. And you specifically have to go out your way to make the team feel more uncomfortable than what they have. And how you do that is by going ahead, and I know this is, again, complete fan talk right now, so I understand that if this is really off base from how a front office is going to run, I'm not surprised. I'm just voicing my opinion while giving some educated analysis along with it from what I know in the industry. If you go to this Mets club and say, guys, we have parted ways with Eric Chavez, and you as a player are going to think to yourself, I was a factor behind that. If you have been underperforming from your career norms this year, you're a factor behind that. If you look across the board, pretty much the entire Mets lineup is underperforming across the board from their career norms. So, okay, that's where it becomes a philosophy issue. So even if it's justified, you know it's likely going to ruffle some feathers with the players. But how do the players respond to such a thing? How do the players respond to hearing from David Stearns and or Carlos Mendoza saying along the lines of, yeah, you know this guy that you like that's been in the organization the past couple of years? We just had to fire him because of your lack of production. You're either going to take that as fuel to the fire and use it for good and right your wrongs as a player and simplify your game, or it's going to be the complete opposite. You're going to press harder, and things are going to get worse than what they currently have been. I realize that that is a dicey gamble to make, but the counter is, what is the proper solution otherwise? If you guys can enlighten me as to how this team can get right internally while making some type of organizational move for the better, I would love to hear what that move could potentially be. Because outside of that, you think of the following. Maybe the Mets should consider sending Brett Beatty down. He hasn't really provided a whole lot over the past 2 months. Luis Angel Acuna could provide a similar spark like he did towards the end of last season as he came up for Francisco Lindor. You could go ahead and do something like that, but how much of a needle mover is that really going to be for the club? It feels like it's going to be a lateral at best. Most can agree there, right? Then you think about, okay, if it's not the coaching staff, if you're not going to do something with a guy like Brett Beatty, what about the lineup, right? What about that lineup? Carlos Mendoza, we know, has mixed and matched things to a degree this season, but why not mix and match them more? We're at a point where we have absolutely nothing to lose, and the notion that guys need to be in a specific order right now is pretty silly when that specific order has been arguably the worst in baseball for 2+ months, and collectively all season long has been bottom 5 in baseball with runners in scoring position. There is nothing in the statistics to suggest that at this point, August 9th, 2025, of this video coming out right here, right now, that the Mets should stay with the same philosophy that they've had in the lineup front. They shouldn't. You could even make the argument that a guy like Juan Soto should be put in leadoff Because if Buddy's so infatuated with having himself perform while not performing with guys on base, you might as well put him in greater opportunities to do exactly that. So at least you're going to continue to get production out of him. I know. I would love to see Soto rake and thrive batting 2, 3, or 4 in this lineup, deeper in the order with guys on base. But what we have seen, the commonality all season long, is that he doesn't have that clutch gene in his body. He's had it. We know he's had it, but he doesn't have it yet this season. And I'm not really sure how much more the Mets can risk waiting on and hopes that things turn around when nothing has turned around. Things continue to get better. You have less than 50 games less this season. You're in a closer position of being out of playoffs than you were having the comfortability to say, hey, you're going to win the division, you could rightfully argue right now. So don't you think at this point in time that it's going to at least get through to someone's thick skull to say, hey, we need to make a change here? So if it's not going to be those things that I just proposed, let's talk rotation, because the rotation is the same thing that we've been beating this drum on all season long, guys. And I understand we have our reinforcements coming. As you guys can see, our Paul Blackburn went 5.2 innings of 7 hit, 3-run, 2-run baseball with 3 strikeouts on 0 walks. Can you tell how much I'm ecstatic to see Paul Blackburn back with this Mets team? And this is not a slight on Paul, as it's a further reality of the problems that the Mets have with the rotation heading in this season. Too many mid and back end options that they have to rely on to potentially be something more. So when Blackburn does inevitably get utilized by the Mets and can't really go beyond 5 innings, what are you going to say to yourself? Color me shocked. It's more of the same. Absolutely more of the same. But when we talk rotation, let's talk about the kids. Because the kids, as I said, have been absolutely not raking, because they're the ones pitching. They've been doing a really, really good job. And to expand more on the kiddos, everybody, let's get into the following. Let me go ahead and pull this up. Let me go ahead and do this, and then let's get in this for you guys to see right here, right now. Noah McLean, latest outing. Usually I make fancier graphics for this, guys, but I was really working on the fly today to make sure that this video got out at least a couple hours before the game, depending on the result. And I think it's going to hold true regardless on the game results. Even if the Mets blow out the Brewers in Game 2 of the series, they still have so many more things to work on. That goes without saying. But as you can see, Noah McLean, 5.2 innings, 1 hit, 0 earned run, 3 walks, 7 strikeout baseball, is now down to a 2.81 ERA there that we're seeing. I mean, you can't really ask for more in the case of Noah McLean at the AAA level. Yeah, if you ask David Stearns, they'll say that they're getting closer to being ready, but they're not there yet. So that's a David Stearns up. MO. All right, let's go ahead. Let's take a look at a guy like Jonah Tong. What did Jonah Tong do? Absolutely dominate yet again. In his latest outing, a couple days ago, he was carving up the top prospects for the Yankees organization, including George Lombard, who he struck out multiple times. One looking as well as one swinging at minimum. More of the same from Jonah Tong, continuing to dominate the way that we have seen pretty much all year long. And now, as you guys can see in these statistics right now, when we look at among 256 minor league pitchers with 80-plus innings pitched this season, Jonah Tong ranks first in ERA with a 1.58 ERA, first in FIP with a 1.74, first in strikeout percentage, 40.5, third in WHIP at 0.94, fifth in swing and strike percentage at 16.5, and ninth in ground ball percentage at 55.2. Pretty elite. It's almost like Jonah Tong should be at the AAA level, yet we're continuing to let him rot in AA because why, David Stearns? You let me know why exactly that is. And miss me with the nonsense on the walk rate. That is not nearly enough of a needle mover to suggest why the top pitching prospect in baseball, you can rightfully argue, shouldn't be in AA anymore. Shout out to Matthew Brownstein on X as well for relaying these numbers. Really appreciate that. So Jonah Tong's been doing his thing. You know, then we look at, all right, how's a guy like Brandon Sproat been? Well, Brandon Sproat's been good. Brandon Sproat has continued to do his job. As you guys can see right now from Joe DeMayo of SNY. Shout out to Joe. Always does a good job with prospect coverage, specifically there for SNY. 6 innings, 3 hit, 3 runs, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. He threw 84 pitches, AUC 53 strikes. Fastball topped right around 100 if you rounded it. And over his past 7 starts, spending 39 innings now, he's a 1.15 ERA with 43 strikeouts. So all the more reason to suggest that the Mets should consider one of the kids. Yet, when we talk to David Stearns about the following, he has this to say. Well, actually, I apologize. We might not have the clip for you, but I'm going to play other clips here in a second, everybody, in regards to Stearns. What David Stearns said yesterday was just more of the same in regards to the prospects, which is that, you know, they're continuing to perform, and we may see them here soon, but not yet. It's just more of the same stuff that we've been hearing from David. Okay, so what have I been proposing for the past north of a month now? It's something that I think not only makes logical sense, but is silly that hasn't been considered yet. It is as follows. One, if not both of them, Brandon Sproat and Noah McLean should get called up in line for the next turn in the order or close to, and they should be utilized in piggyback situations with guys like Frankie Monttos, Clay Holmes. It should be utilized for everyone that isn't David Pearson because no one can provide length, but we can only stretch this so thin right now. So let's just go ahead with Monttos and Holmes. What do those two starters have in common? Not only are they former New York Yankees, but they're two frustrating starters for the Mets as of late, where they have not been providing the quality that we're looking for. Holmes did have a terrible outing his past time out there, but again, more of the same, just not providing length at all. Montos is pitching against his former team today. I'm expecting him to be batting practice, so anything otherwise will have me very happy as a fan. But if you utilize a McLean and a Sproat in a piggyback situation where they begin the ball game for, say, the first 3-4 innings, and then you bring in a Monttos or a Holmes for long relief, tell me how that doesn't make sense. Do it vice versa. Maybe you want Holmes and or Monttos to get the start, and then you want to consider the kids for, middle long relief. Why not consider that? And the notion that, we shouldn't consider the kids now, miss me with the nonsense. As long as they don't go beyond 50 innings, they're fine when it comes to rookie eligibility and their team control and all that kind of stuff. And they're not going to get 50 innings from now till the end of the season, throughout the regular season, right? They're not even really necessarily noted to be able to handle that workload. The expectation is that Sproat can handle north of 50 innings left this year. At least that's the assumption. McLean, right around 40. So right in line with what the Mets would be needing, if not less than, for the remainder of the year to be utilized in smaller outings while being piggybacked with another starter of the following that we just relayed. So until the Mets go ahead and do something like that, I'm going to continue to ponder why aren't we doing it? Because there's just too many reasons as to why that makes sense in itself. And then you add in the fact that Noah McLean has been Mr. Consistent. He hasn't been considered really, heavily considered rather, not enough to get to the major league level. And I really think that's a shame when you consider the fact of how much he could have positively impacted this rotation. Maybe could have provided length by going north of 6 innings and multiple outings leading up to the deadline. But I guess we'll never know now. We're just going to wait until David Stearns reaches the point where he himself has had enough. And circle back to David Stearns and the fatigue, everybody. The comments by Stearns, I'm not going to play the audio on. I'm just going to relay the following. I believe that this is a good offensive team. I believe in the process we have in place, and I'm confident we're going to see that going forward. While that is very Pobo talk from David Stearns, that's what you'd expect from the team president, the problem, David, and you know this very well, is that while you expect things to turn around, and you are hopeful based on what the advanced numbers and metrics will tell you, this is 2 months straight of things being far from good. This is 2 months straight of saying, hey, regardless of the numbers being relatively the same, we have had a huge problem. And you want to know where that falls more on the shoulders of than anyone else besides the players, which is the obvious one. It comes down to the coaching staff. It comes down to the philosophy. When you have a collective group not performing well, it goes beyond just one individual player. So miss me with the nonsense to suggest otherwise. So okay, that's what David had to say then. Then you look at David Stearns was asked if the Mets' recent hitting struggles are all in the hitting coaches. And he says, no, I have confidence in our hitting coaches. I think we have good hitting coaches. Now, granted, Stearns was set up there. I think it was honestly a kind of a silly question to ask the media. I know that they have to, but you're never going to hear from a president say, oh yeah, by the way, we've been pondering, firing Eric Chavez right now. Even if that happens over the next week, you're never going to hear anything about it really publicly until it happens, because it's bad business, and we know that can get messy fast. The way that in the previous Wilpon regime that we've seen that be the case with so many things being leaked ahead of time because they could not keep things hush-hush. So that's a very standard answer to get from Stearns. I don't expect him to throw anyone under the bus there, but obviously the fan reaction is going to be what it's going to be, which is not positive, not good. And the reason why is, for all the reasons I just told you, there is little to nothing to justify keeping this hitting coach duo outside of the fact that they're basically grandfathered in here from the previous regime prior to David Stearns. That is the only reason to justify why they're still here. There is little to nothing else about it. Francisco Lindor enlightened Eric Chavez last season that he needs to do a better job. If your quote-unquote captain is telling your hitting coach that, you think, maybe, just maybe, we should steer ourselves in a different direction here if you're David Stearns. But no, it's August 9th, and we're talking about the same nonsense that's plagued this team since the start of the year. So then we look at further comments from David here. I'm excited to see him pitch tomorrow, meaning today, in the case of Frankie Monttos. And obviously, again, you're never going to hear him say anything otherwise. He wants, obviously, to get the best out of Monttos. And this is a bigger deal for Stearns, because when you think of the big moves that Stearns has made since becoming a president, this is the largest signing that he's made outside of bringing guys back like Manaea and bringing in Soto. Monttos is really as David Stearns of a pickup as they come. This had all of his hands and fingerprints on it, and has been nothing short of an absolute dumpster fire. on $34 million of total value for a Monttos who is absolutely opting in for next season, because why wouldn't he at this current rate? He'd be foolish not to. So Stearns not only hopes and is excited to see Monttos pitch, but he's desperately praying that Monttos performs well, because this is where more falls on his decision-making as the president, should that not be the case. And that is where we also have a problem, because the Mets are not going to be rash to just DFA a Frankie Monttos. So what do? You do what they're currently doing, which is by utilizing Monttos and more of a piggyback situation with a spot starter today, which, again, I don't love that idea of whatsoever, if I'm being completely honest with you, especially when that spot starter is going to be Reed Garrett. Yes, folks, the Mets are going with Reed Garrett for their spot starter. They're not calling up someone. They're not considering a Huascar Brosman from the minor leagues, in which he's been actually solid in spot starts this year. They're not considering a Noel McLean on at least a day's rest. I believe he would be on at least 1 day's rest, because I think McLean pitched 4 days ago, if not 3. So I also apologize, guys. We're going to try to fix our camera in real time here. Sometimes when we're doing these shows, they like to get a little out of focus, but it doesn't mean that we can't try to fix it live in real time as it's happening. We're going to go ahead and try to do that. And there we go. All right. So we're going to use Reed Garrett today. Can you guys tell how ecstatic I am about that? Cue the sarcasm. So you're going to put Reed Garrett in a spot that he's never been utilized this season, when the Mets are 5-10 and spot starts this year. But let's go ahead, step right up, and meet the effing Mets, because that is the proper philosophy that they're showing. This is where the Stearns fatigue is kicking in, everybody. I love David Stearns in the sense I really think that he's going to build this team for the better and make this team so much better than what they would have otherwise been under previous regimes. And I wholeheartedly believe that. I like David Stearns a lot. I like his processes behind his mindset, behind why he makes his decisions, why he's drastic in certain areas while very conservative in others. But we're witnessing in real time the first time that Stearns is really handling the expectation that comes with being the president. Last year was different, with the Mets getting out of their own run, 11 games below 500. This year you had World Series expectations after making the NLCS a year ago. This year you had World Series expectations with signing Juan Soto. And you are so far from meeting them right now that, again, we're watching in real time how a president like Stearns handles and combats these things. And while I agree with him on his processes to a degree, especially when it comes to not being too rash in your decision making, it's a marathon, not a sprint, of a 162. In that same breath, you can say to yourself, we're also very fed up by the lack of action that's happened over the past 2+ calendar months. And that in itself is what needs to be fixed and remedied for this team. Because if that doesn't happen, we're going to continue these same exact nonsensical conversations to break down how the Mets now dropped 10 of their past 11 games. If I talk about that later on tonight, our post-game show, it's going to be because of more of the same, more than likely. The Mets are finding ways to lose, and they're also losing ball games that they won so many times last year. The Mets were fantastic in the summer of 2024 and handling one-run ball games. This team is such a shell of that they have zero identity. They look like they have a lack of confidence. They look like they're heavily pressing, and they look like a team that is destined to fall short as soon as they give up an early lead, because they're allowing no wiggle room for a Kodai Senga to have, again, only allowed technically 1 earned run yesterday, even though it should have been 2 because he was the error to begin the inning, but that's a discussion for another day. There's zero wiggle room for error for this pitching staff when this offense has nothing to show for it. And that in itself is why this offense is still the core of the problem. And this team will get absolutely nowhere this year until they either A, make a drastic change, something that's going to spark this team, or B, something clicks internally that hasn't happened yet that finally gets them right. Maybe they rally around something stupid like they have in the years past. I'm not entirely sure, obviously. If I did, I have all the answer for you right now, and I'd probably be talking to David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza as we speak as to how to get them right. But what I'm suggesting, just from a fan point of view, as well as what I've been seeing with the eye test and what the numbers have suggested all season long. That's why I feel the way that I feel. That's why I'm passionate as a fan. That's why I'm not going to hold back from voicing my displeasure when things aren't right. When you have World Series expectations, I expect you to at least get close to meeting them, the way that the Mets, again, went far above expectations last year when you look at all the ebbs and flows of the 162 and postseason play. This team looks such a shell of itself versus what they were a year ago. And until that changes, you can't expect fans, including myself, to be instilled with this overwhelming sense of confidence. So that is what I have for you, everybody. Thank you again so much for watching. Hit that like and subscribe on your way out. This is, again, a very far more unorthodox version of our Mets update segments that we do versus me being pretty much, kind of being more collared up and saying, all right, guys, Wardy's here. We're going to break down the following today, this and that. And then I got to let loose a little bit because just like each and every one of you, I too am fed up and I too am fatigued, not only by David Stearns' continued rotation and saying the same nonsense nonsense while nothing's changing, but also the team itself going out on a nightly basis where we know exactly what the story is going to be in the end. It's just a question of who is necessarily writing the script. Is it going to be this guy tonight? That's going to be the X Factor. Is it going to be this guy tonight? Is it going to be the collective group, the way that's been so much? Either way, the Mets have problems. They have a major problem, and they need to fix this, and fast, before it's too late. Thank you guys again for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. The good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And be on the lookout for more consistent content covering the Mets here on WardyNYM. Peace out, folks. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets.